Russia had a problem no amount of new tanks could fix. Near Pokrovsk, Ukrainian FPV drones were eating armored assaults before they reached the first tree line. So Russian crews welded scrap steel and anti-drone mesh over their tank hulls and rolled out the Turtle tank, a machine built to shrug off a $500 quadcopter and drag infantry onto Ukrainian trenches. On December 3, 2025, near the village of Razine, one of them nosed into an anti-tank ditch and stopped. What finished it was not a single lucky strike. It was a swarm and a math problem the welders never solved. That math is the whole story, so hold onto it. Somewhere in the mess of welded plate on a Turtle tank, there is always one seam the armor can't cover. Finding it is not marksmanship. It is patience and numbers and pilots taking turns. We'll come back to a single tank near Siversk that reportedly soaked up more than 60 drone hits before it died. Keep that number in mind. It tells you what this weapon really is and what it isn't. Start with the ground. Because the ground is why any of this happened. Pokrovsk sits in Donetsk Oblast, a rhododendral town that has spent late 2025 as one of the most fought-over points on the entire front. Just to its east lies Mianored, and the two towns together form a knot of Ukrainian defense that Russia has been trying to unpick for months. Take Pokrovsk, and several supply routes behind the Ukrainian line get harder to hold. That is the prize. That is why Russian commanders kept feeding armor and infantry into a grinder that had already swallowed enormous numbers of both. By the autumn of 2025, though, the grinder had a name, and the name was the drone. Ukrainian FPV units had layered the approaches to Pokrovsk with quadcopters, cheap, fast, short-range strike drones flown by a pilot wearing goggles, watching a live video feed steering the thing straight into a target, 5 to 20 kilometers of range. A warhead scavenged from an anti-tank grenade. A price tag most weeks under $500, and enough of them flown well enough that a Russian tank crossing open ground in daylight had the life expectancy of a match in the wind. This is the pressure the Turtle tank was designed to answer. Russian units on the Pokrovsk and Mianored axis started showing up in geolocated combat footage with their tanks buried under improvised roofs. Sheets of steel, angle iron, and layers of chain link and mesh cage welded over the turret and hull. From above, the things looked less like a T-72 and more like a garden shed on tracks or a scrap metal tortoise, which is exactly where the nickname came from. The logic was simple and on paper, not stupid. If a quadcopter's small warhead detonates on an outer layer of mesh and scrap plate, it never reaches the tank's real armor. The drone dies. The tank lives. And a tank that lives long enough to reach a Ukrainian trench line can do what tanks do: crush positions, shield the infantry walking behind it, and open a hole in the line. That was the idea. Punch a hardened armored spearhead through the drone belt, reopen a stalled assault axis, and let the foot soldiers exploit the gap. On the whiteboard in whatever command post signed off on it, the Turtle tank reopens Pokrovsk. The reality was messier. And the mess is the interesting part. Here is the first crack in the plan, and it is the crack that decides everything downstream. To armor a tank that heavily against drones, you have to bury it. You weld cages over the optics. You box in the turret so it can barely traverse. You pile so much scrap over the hull that the crew's own vision devices, the periscopes and sights they use to see out, end up staring into a wall of steel and wire. The Turtle tank survives the drone by going half blind. A Russian crew inside one of these things often cannot see much beyond what a single forward slit allows. They drive by radio instruction, by memory, by hope. And a blind tank on a battlefield full of anti-tank ditches, mines, and Ukrainian observers is a tank that is about to make a mistake. Second crack. All that welded weight goes onto a hull and engine that were never designed to carry it. The tank gets slower, more sluggish, harder to reverse out of trouble. It bogs more easily in soft ground. It throws a track more readily under the strain. So the machine built to survive contact actually becomes more likely to get stuck in contact. And a Turtle tank that stops moving stops being a tank at all. It becomes a very expensive, very stationary target with a crew inside who can barely see the men flying drones at them. Ukrainian FPV operators work this out fast, because their whole job is watching Russian armor make mistakes and turning those mistakes into confirmed losses. And the operators who have talked about it, in interviews carried by open-source channels and Ukrainian military accounts, describe a method that has nothing to do with one heroic pilot threading one perfect shot. They describe attrition. You do not out-clever the turtle tank in a single pass. You wear it down. Let me put a number on that with the caveat it deserves. The figure Ukrainian operators and OSINT trackers throw around is that it takes roughly 8 FPV strikes on average to disable a turtle tank. That number is a one-sided claim. It comes from the pilots doing the destroying, not from any audited independent tally, and you should file it as an operator's estimate rather than a hard statistic. But it lines up with everything else we can see in the footage. One drone rarely does it, two rarely do it. You hit the thing again and again, stripping away the outer scrap layer by layer, blowing off cage sections, cracking the mesh, until somewhere in that battered wreck a real weak point finally opens up. And the only weak point the sources actually confirm is the engine compartment, the rear deck where the power plant lives, and where a drone that gets in can turn a running tank into a burning one. That is the pattern. Swarm wears it down. Then one drone finishes it at the back. Hold that shape in your head, because now we go to the days when it happened. The first case worth naming comes on November 14, 2025, near Pokrovsk itself. The State Border Guard Service fields its own drone units, and one of them, an unmanned systems unit operating under the call sign Phoenix, caught a turtle tank in the middle of an attack. The footage that came out of that engagement shows the now familiar silhouette, the welded roof, the mesh skirts grinding forward, and it shows the thing burning. Phoenix burned a turtle tank that day. One machine meant to be the tip of an assault turned into a column of black smoke on a churned field, and the attack it was supposed to lead went nowhere. That was one tank on one day. What came 3 weeks later was not one tank. It was a column, and it is the clearest picture we have of what happens when the whole turtle tank concept meets the whole Ukrainian drone and artillery system at once. December 3, 2025, north of Mianorad, near the village of Razine. A Russian mechanized column moves out under the cover of fog, and the fog is the point, because fog is the one thing that genuinely degrades FPV drones. A quadcopter pilot flies by camera. Take away the pilot's visibility and you take away a chunk of his ability to find and finish targets. So the Russian plan was reasonable. Use the weather the drones hate, push a mechanized column forward under it, and get the armor into the Ukrainian defenses before anyone could pick it apart from the sky. The column belonged to the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade. It included 11 vehicles. 3 of them were turtle tanks. The fog was supposed to hide them. It didn't hide them enough. 2 Ukrainian formations were watching that sector. The drone side was handled by units of the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps working the unmanned systems. The guns belonged to the 68th Jaeger Brigade running the artillery. Between them, they had exactly the combination a fogged-in armored column fears most: eyes that can still find you, and weapons that don't need perfect visibility to reach you. And they had the one thing every ambush needs, which is a column that has to funnel through terrain it can't avoid. Then the terrain did its job. One of the turtle tanks bogged down in an anti-tank ditch. Think about what that means for the vehicles behind it. A column on the move has momentum and dispersion. A column that stops is a line of stationary steel with nowhere to go. The lead tank wedged itself into the ditch and stopped, and the assault that depended on speed and cover suddenly had neither. The fog that was meant to protect the column now trapped it in a place it couldn't leave, in front of a Ukrainian force that had already ranged the ground. What followed was concentrated fire, the artillery of the 68th and the drones of the 7th working the stalled column from multiple directions at once. Not one strike. Many layered from guns and from the air, hitting a formation that could no longer maneuver its way out of the beaten zone. When the geolocated footage and the after-action tallies were pieced together on open-source channels, the count was 11 vehicles destroyed. The entire column, all 3 turtle tanks among them. Stop on that number because it is the answer to the whole experiment. Russia's counter-drone super tank fielded 3 at a time inside a purpose-built mechanized push, timed for the exact weather that hurts drones most, and the result was the total loss of the column. The turtle armor did not save the assault. The concept met the system and the system won. But averages and column tallies don't tell you what a turtle tank feels like to fight one-on-one. For that we go back a bit, and a good way to the northeast, to a different sector entirely. And this is where I have to be careful with the map. Not every turtle tank kill happened at Pokrovsk. In October 2025, near Siversk, a town well north of the Pokrovsk fighting, Ukrainian drones went to work on a single turtle tank in an engagement that has become almost a case study in what these machines can and cannot survive. This one absorbed dozens of FPV hits. Drone after drone came in, struck the scrap and the mesh, and detonated on the outer shell without stopping the tank. On the video feeds, it must have looked indestructible, a machine walking through a storm of impacts, shedding cage sections and shrugging off warhead after warhead. That is exactly the picture the turtle tank was built to create, and for a while it held. The armor did what welded scrap is supposed to do against a small charge. It kept the drones from reaching anything that mattered, until one of them reached the engine compartment. That is the whole difference. Not a firing port, not some exotic seam, the confirmed weak point is the power plant at the rear. And once a drone got a warhead into it, the tank that had shrugged off dozens of hits was finished. Immobilized. Burning. The scrap roof that stopped the first 30 strikes could not save the engine from the one strike that found the deck. And a turtle tank with a dead engine is worse than a dead tank. It is a deadweight obstacle sitting in the middle of your own assault, blocking the vehicles behind it, exactly the way that ditched tank at Razine turned a moving column into a stationary target list. Now the number I told you to hold on to. Among these engagements, Ukrainian operators describe one especially hardened turtle tank that reportedly took more than 60 FPV hits before it finally died. 60. Again, that is an operator and tracker claim, not an audited figure, and you should treat the exact count as an illustration rather than a certified statistic. But even as an illustration, it tells you two true things at once, and they point in opposite directions. The first true thing is that the welded armor works. A machine that eats 60 drone strikes is genuinely resisting the weapon that was supposed to obliterate it in one or two. Against a single quadcopter, against a lone pilot on a lone pass, the turtle tank often wins. That is not nothing. That is a real answer to a real threat. And it is why Russian units kept building them. The second true thing is that it doesn't matter, because Ukraine does not attack with one drone. It attacks with many, flown by many pilots in relays backed by artillery, over a battlefield the defenders have already mapped. And no amount of scrap steel changes the arithmetic of that. If it takes 8 drones on average, the operators send more than 8. If one freak example takes 60, then somewhere there are 60 drones and the pilots to fly them, and a supply chain that can build another 60 next week for the price of a single tank shell. The turtle tank wins the duel and loses the war of numbers every time. And it loses coming and going. Remember the trade the armor demands. To survive the swarm, the tank goes half blind and half lame. Its optics are caged. Its turret can barely turn. Its overloaded engine bogs in the soft ground and the ditches. So the very machine built to punch through the drone belt is the machine least able to see the ditch it's about to drive into, least able to reverse out once it's stuck, least able to find the drones killing it. Blinded, immobilized, and then finished at the engine deck. The armor buys survival against one drone at the cost of everything that would let it survive the battlefield. That is the pattern under all 3 cases. Phoenix burning one at Pokrovsk in November. The 7th Rapid Reaction Corps and the 68th Jaeger Brigade wiping out an 11-vehicle column, 3 turtle tanks included in the fog near Razine in December. The Siversk tank eating dozens of hits in October before a drone found its engine. Different sectors, different units, different weeks, the same story every time. The armor delays the outcome. It does not change it. There is one more unit worth mentioning, with a heavy caveat. In the open source chatter around these engagements, one snippet credits a turtle tank kill to a Ukrainian formation identified as the 413th Regiment, with the location left unspecified and the detail unverified. I flag it because honesty about sourcing is the whole point of a channel like this. Some of these kills are cleanly documented with geolocated footage and named brigades, and some float around as fragments you note and don't overstate. The confirmed, well-attributed cases are the 3 we've walked through. The rest is the fog of a very real war, and it's better to say so than to invent a tidy single crew and pretend it explains everything. So what did Russia actually get for the turtle tank program? Measured against what it was supposed to do, almost nothing. It was supposed to reopen stalled axes around Pokrovsk and Mianored by pushing survivable armor through the drone screen. Instead, the documented cases are a run of burned and abandoned hulls, a destroyed naval infantry column, and a lot of expensive machines turned into obstacles that blocked their own side's advance. The line around Pokrovsk did not break because a tank grew a scrap metal shell. The town stayed contested. The assault axes stayed stalled. And every turtle tank that died took with it a real tank hull, a T-72 or something like it, a machine worth a couple of $1 million traded away against drones that cost a few hundred each. That is the exchange rate that should keep Russian planners up at night, and it is the real meaning of these engagements. Not that one clever pilot threaded one gap, nobody did that, and the story is better for it. The meaning is structural. Ukraine has turned the destruction of a modern main battle tank into a task a squad of FPV operators can complete in an afternoon with a crate of drones and a couple of relays. Bolting scrap steel over the hull doesn't fix that. It just changes the number of drones required from 2 to 8 to once more than 60, and Ukraine has the drones. The improvised armor doesn't beat the swarm. It just makes the swarm work a little harder and photograph a little more dramatically on the way to the same result. The turtle tank was Russia's honest attempt to solve a problem that is eating its army alive. It failed for a reason no welder can weld around. A $500 drone doesn't have to be smarter than a tank or faster or better armored. It only has to be cheaper, and there only have to be enough of them, flown by enough pilots who are willing to take turns. Near Pokrovsk in the fog at Razine, on the deck of a burning hull outside Siversk. That turned out to be true every single time. Russia built a machine to survive one drone. It never built a machine that could survive the math.